This is the unfiltered truth about entrepreneurship. Raw, no BS, no sugarcoating. Welcome to Entrepreneur Intel. I'm your host, Wes Mathews. Each episode, we'll learn from experienced founders and uncover the top 5% learnings that led to their success in all things personal, family, and business. This show is sponsored by Stealth Consulting, delivering clear marketing strategies, ROI, and no surprises. I'm very excited today for our guest. So introducing our guest today, he's an entrepreneur who has successfully launched and exited 5 tech companies, resulting in creating over 10,000 jobs and selling for a combined value of over $200 million. He's helped launch and scale over 100 startups, creating over $1 billion in investor returns. A 4-time New York Times bestselling author of the books Disciplined Dreaming, The Road to Reinvention, Hacking Innovation, and Big Little Breakthroughs. A very highly regarded keynote speaker, a recipient of the United States Presidential Champion of Change Award. He's currently co-founder of Platypus Labs, ImpactEleven, and Muditā Venture Partners. Welcome, Josh Linkner.
Well, it's great to be with you. My pleasure.
That is probably one of the most impressive backgrounds I've been yet to introduce. It's pretty amazing. You've been an entrepreneur for a long time. I have to start this podcast and ask what I ask all of my guests. What's the most important lesson you've learned over your entire career? I'm really excited to dive in, but what's that one thing for you?
You know, it's so hard to say the one thing because, as you know, building a business, there's lots of things. And of course, I'm still learning and we're all still learning together. And, one nugget that comes to mind is an ancient Chinese proverb, which it says the word man. It should say man and woman. It didn't at the time, but it's basically the proverb is man who says it can't be done should not interrupt man doing it. And I've always loved that because essentially it applies that things are more possible than they might seem. And it's easy to throw water on an idea. It's another thing to figure out a way to get it done. And it's funny, like I got lucky a couple of times in my career and eventually tried to trade out luck for a philosophy, which I just call find a way. It's one thing I think is a thread that entrepreneurs do, which is they basically use a combination of ingenuity and resolve to, no matter what's thrown at them, they're going to navigate that. So they can walk through a dark alley of the unknown and come out strong on the other side, knowing that they're going to do what's necessary. They're going to bob and weave, they'll sacrifice whatever they got to do. They're going to find a way. And so that notion of like, there is a way that you can find, and then we take it upon ourselves as entrepreneurs, take the agency and ownership to take on those monsters and demons and slay the dragons and eventually get to the other side. That to me is the commonality among entrepreneurs across all different sizes and shapes and industries.
That's great. So like rewind, go way back with you know, where you started. I mean, where I knew you from, you started a company called ePrize back in like the late, early 2000s. Was that your first sort of entrepreneurial venture or?
It wasn't. So I started my career as a jazz guitarist. I've been playing in smoky rooms for 40 years, believe it or not, and played over 1,000 concerts, put myself through college playing music. And I started a tech company at age 20. I'd never taken a business class. But jazz musicians, well, they find a way. They figure stuff out. They're always improvising. And I was a little bit of a tech nerd. So I was like, well, maybe I could just mail order computer components and assemble them in my college apartment and sell them on campus and make some money. And I had no idea what I was doing. I made a million mistakes, did everything wrong, but I kind of figured it out. And it wasn't like I did sell it. It wasn't a giant outcome, but I learned a lot. And that's sort of, I got the bug. So I was 20, started another company, sold it, started another company, sold it. So by the time I started the ePrize, which you just mentioned, it was 1999. That was already my 4th company. And the other ones weren't quite as large or successful, but we got some traction. And again, I learned a lot from the mistakes, probably more so than the victories. And I just kind of think of myself as a jazz guy. Like I just like creating new stuff and navigating uncertainty and ultimately figuring things out.
So ePrize, like back in 1999, it was a tech company, right? I mean, it was around sweepstakes. Like, how did you come up with that idea? I mean, that was such an important time in the tech world. Internet's just sort of coming out. Like, how did you fall into sweepstakes and that whole model?
Well, I started in 1995 a web design company. Actually, much like your previous business, HLM, where it wasn't as cool as yours, by the way, just to be clear. But we built websites and hosting, et cetera. And this was back when no one even knew what the internet was. I would literally call people up and like, hey, have you ever heard of the internet? They're like, what's that? Like, I could build you a website. What's a website? Anyway, I ended up selling the company in 1999 to a public firm. Had a good outcome, but in that process, Volvo was a client, and they asked me to build them an online sweepstakes. It was around the launch of a new car. And I realized two things. One, I realized how complicated it was. It sounds like simple, but there was all these like legal and tech and like all these weird moving parts. So I realized it wasn't easy to deliver. But more importantly, I realized how motivating the chance to win was on human behavior. Hundreds of thousands of people signed up to win this car. And in doing so, they converted from an anonymous browser to a known permission-based relationship. So that was sort of the spark, was both the power of a chance to win as a motivator of human behavior, coupled with the complexity it is to deliver it. And at the time, Wes, there was a lot of people were focused on internet advertising. And I could have done that and been like the 700th mover, but no one was focused on internet promotion. And as you know, promotion is a very large part of the marketing mix, but it was really dormant online. So I figured, like, instead of just following the herd on internet advertising, what if I did the opposite and said, could I be the first internet promotion company? And that's also been a theme of mine throughout my life and business, which is when I see people doing one thing, I want to do the opposite. If I see a herd of folks going in one direction, I'm like, cool, what's the exact polar opposite? And so that's how I started ePrize. I got this experience from Volvo, realized that nobody else was pursuing digital promotions. And I said, hey, let's go.
So it sounds like out of a request from one of your customers, you spun off with this new business idea, which you ended up building into a very, very large company. I mean, I forget the stat, but maybe you can educate me on it. But you had most of the Fortune 500 companies at some point that was engaged with ePrize, didn't you?
Yeah, we did. We ended up working, so by the way, as most entrepreneurs know listening, entrepreneurship is never like, hey, it's a cool idea in the shower and then you're, whisked off to fame and fortune in a limousine while wearing white gloves. That's not how it's like, you're smacked down, you have challenges, you overcome. It's hard. But yeah, over time we grew to scale and we had worked with 74 of the top 100 brands, Coca-Cola, Procter & Gamble, Nike, Microsoft, you name it. And so, yeah, we did some very large scale programs. At the time when I sold the business, we were running a program for Coca-Cola called My Coke Rewards, which was a global program. Underneath the caps of every Coca-Cola product on the planet, there was a code, and you could go in and log that code and you could win stuff. You could earn points per gear. And so we ran that program globally for the Coca-Cola company.
Which is crazy to think about because I remember being in high school. So I graduated high school in 1999. I remember drinking Coke and popping that open. And you look at that and like the infrastructure and business behind that is really amazing. But I mean, as an entrepreneur, sounds like leading up to ePrize, there's a theme with you of starting companies, selling them. I mean, when you started ePrize, was that just ingrained in you that I want to start a business and sell it? Like, what were some of the levers or things that made you say, hey, I want to do this, but I ultimately want to sell it?
Well, I got a little taste of that bug because of the pie, I guess, because, I'd done it 3 times at that point. I was 29. I was like, and honestly, it's so funny because, when we start a business and where you start and where you end is often very, very different. It's very rare that someone has this brilliant idea and is perfectly envisioned and then you execute the idea and everything. That's pretty rare. You end up pivoting and adapting a lot. My first vision for ePrize, honestly, was that I was going to build it with a single product and sell the company in 2 years for $10 million. Like that was it. Like that's what I'm going to do. And the business evolved to this multifaceted, very complex software agency type business. We had clients all over the world, different languages. It was very complicated. And we did a partial exit in 2005. So it was 6 years later, but not a full exit until 2012, which is, 13 years later. So, and it was bigger than my original goal, but like things always evolve in a different manner than you envision them.
So with like that initial sale in 2005, like as an entrepreneur, like what prompted you to sell a portion of it? Or was it obviously to make a change or to get to the next level, but can you dive a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, we at the time we're getting some knocks on the door from private equity and other strategic buyers. And we started to explore what the market would look like for either a whole sale of the business or a partial sale. And we ended up negotiating with a couple large private equity firms. And at the 11th hour, some of my existing investors, along with a couple new ones, said, why would we let this beautiful company go to Silicon Valley when we could keep it right here in Detroit? And so that time, Dan Gilbert was not an investor until then. He came in and participated in that. And we sold part of the business. He and others came in. We sort of reconstituted the cap table. And so it was helpful because we got some, fresh eyes on the business, fresh, mentors. And we were also able to take some chips off the table. One of the things that, more as much as anyone, that as you're building a business, especially if it's early on in your career, you've got all your net worth tied up in a single business that actually can be unhealthy. That means every decision you make, you're like betting your family's future. I wasn't in that spot at that point, but others in my business were. And so it allowed people to take some chips off the table, and, now you have to worry about your kids' college education, or you pay off your house or whatever. And so I thought it was a pretty healthy thing. So we ended up, taking I think it was a $66 million recap at the time. And so part of the business for that. And then kept building the rest up until 2012.
How does that change the perspective for you? Or maybe you can give like deeper insight as being an entrepreneur. Like, you had the idea, you started a company, and then along the way you start to let, whether it's investors or private equity in, then you have an event in 2005. Like, does that path look the same for you now as like the original entrepreneur? Did it kind of feel more like a job, or like, did anything shift for you?
It's an excellent question. And it certainly can. And it has for many people. In my particular case, and every case is different. That's the key point. But
Yeah.
Because it was led by our existing investors, Dan Gilbert and his group became a very big investor. I was very close personal friends with Dan at the time. And so it actually didn't feel that different. The real thing was, hey, we were able to take some chips off the table, but it was really more an investment in the future. And so I was fully in the CEO chair. They were backing and supporting me and my leadership, with adding a lot of value too, by the way. It wasn't just me, but it really didn't feel that way. It felt invigorating. It was like, okay, cool. That was one chapter. And now let's go for something bigger. Let's see what we can build together. So at that point, we bought other companies, we made acquisitions, we expanded globally. And so the extra access to capital allowed us to scale even further and ultimately get to the point where we did. So in my case, it didn't feel like now I'm working for the man, because I had partners that allowed me to continue to build my vision.
And what year was that? Did you completely exit that business?
So in 2010, I was the CEO, sole founder, CEO till 2010. I had a little bit of an epiphany, Wes. I always felt like I was humble enough to know when I was the right leader for the job, but when I was the wrong leader for the job. And as we got to that point, like, I'm a jazz musician, and jazz like is scrappy art form. It's like messy. I'm pretty good at that. But I read this article that basically said as a company grows, the metaphor of leadership changes. And it literally said this in the article. It goes from jazz musician, when you're early on, it's young and messy, to symphony conductor, where it's more about precision and accuracy and alignment and, and all that. And so I couldn't just make a change on the fly anymore. I had to bring my sales team in and bring the metrics team in and bring the legal team in. And, it's starting to get slow and clunky because it was a bigger company. And I looked myself in the mirror and said, you know what? I'm a pretty good jazz musician. I'm an okay symphony conductor at best. And so the company's growing, profitable. There wasn't like an external factor, but I went to my board and shared the article with them. And I said, listen, I always knew when it would be time. I've always put the company's needs ahead of my own personal needs. My ego, let's do what's right for the company. At this next stage of the company's growth, I think it needs a badass symphony conductor rather than a jazz musician who plays a little classical. And they were supportive. We did a national search, hired a search firm, and I hired Matt Wise to become the CEO. He's a terrific symphony conductor. I moved to a chairman role, executive chairman, and stayed on until 2012 to answer your question when we fully sold the business. And Matt joked around with me a lot. He's like, man, I could have never done what you did. And I said, yeah, I wouldn't want to do what you're doing. And so it was kind of like having the self-awareness to know what you're good at and where you need to bring in somebody else who it was his time. And he did a phenomenal job.
No, that's really great feedback. I think as an entrepreneur, it's tough. I bump into many entrepreneurs where some have their egos they're too big, or, hey, this is my baby. And even though the world around them and things aren't working well, they just won't give it up, or they can't look in the mirror and say, hey, I might not be the right person. I think in my world, I've heard, at some point you have to take an entrepreneurial company into a professionally managed company. So that kind of takes you out of ePrize onto your next. And I think where I met you was when you kind of rolled into Detroit Venture Partners. And for me, my perspective is, I've grown up, I'm 42. I dated myself. I was in high school in 1999. Detroit was, zombie apocalypse. You didn't go down there. You went straight to the baseball game and you came straight home. It just wasn't a place that I would want to invest and spend any time with. And I think at the time I met you, there was like this thing happening in Detroit, like tech's coming to Detroit. Everybody's talking about Detroit. I mean, it came out of nowhere. And then all of a sudden I meet you, and I think you were sitting down in Detroit Venture Partners. You want to dive in a little bit about, to me, like, that's fascinating that it went from zombie apocalypse, from my perspective, to the place where everybody wants to be.
Yeah, well, thank you. I really credit Dan Gilbert. I mean, he had this incredible vision. I went down with him. This was before he was as famous as he is now. This must have been, 2007 or 8. And we're down there, and he's like, he and I, just two of us, he didn't have security around or anything. We're walking around. He's like, what do you see? I'm like, a zombie apocalypse, And he's like, he's like giving this dirty look. He's like, no, man, like I see this beautiful opportunity and like, let's build this beautiful city back. And this is a city with a soul. And, this is like, let's make this happen. And so he had this incredible vision. And sometimes it takes someone with that kind of not only resources, but vision. And so as we started talking over the next couple of years, we became close friends. And he said, hey, after ePrize, what are you thinking? And I was like, what I really want to do is be a venture investor. I want to invest in other entrepreneurs and be active in supporting their growth and success. So we talked for a couple of years, and together we started Detroit Venture Partners in 2010. And at the time, you're right. People are like, what? You're starting a venture firm in Detroit? What? Like tech entrepreneurs? What? Like, get out of here. Go to Silicon Valley. Go to New York. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And for us, we said, maybe we'll make some money, but we said, maybe we can make a difference. And we're both from Detroit, born in the city, wanted to make Detroit a special place again. And we said, let's take this non-traditional approach using tech investing and supporting and mentoring young entrepreneurs in the city of Detroit to see if we can make a difference. And over time, it was fascinating. When we opened DVP, there wasn't one tech startup in the entire 140 square miles of Detroit, Michigan, not one. Within 18 months of opening our fund, there were 70. But we didn't fund all 70. We only funded a couple of them, but we got some momentum going. And that wasn't 70 in all of Detroit. That was 70 within one block of our building. And so we tried to be sort of a catalyst to help others, invest. And by the way, I'm not taking any credit for where Detroit is now. Dan gets the credit for that. But I did feel like we played a small role in helping to sort of rethink what Detroit could be. And now you see things really on fire. It's very, very exciting. It's very heartening.
Well, I'll give you credit because I could kind of see from the catalyst perspective, all of these companies going down. Obviously, Quicken Loans going down there was a big one, more from a corporate standpoint. But to be able to be an outsider to go down there and see what happens to me, it's like nothing short of amazing. So starting Detroit Venture Partner, you're there for a handful. Are you still involved with Detroit Venture Partner or no? Or
no, so what ended up happening was, I was the CEO for 4 years, and at the end of that period, Dan ended up buying me out. So Dan is now the sole owner and operator of Detroit Venture Partners. Many of my old team members are still there. Jake Cohen, Ted, who else is there? There's a handful of others there. Jared Stasek is still there. So it's doing well. It's thriving. They're still in the Madison building. It's really exciting. But so I went on and did other stuff. I wrote a couple of additional books and invested in a bunch of businesses and sat on boards and the like. And in 2020, my younger brother, Ethan, he's 13 years younger than I am. He became a successful entrepreneur as well. He had a big exit. And we were sort of like many people in the middle of COVID thinking, well, what what's next? And so the two of us decided to start another venture fund. So we started a firm called Muditā Venture Partners, Mudita. Mudita actually is a Sanskrit term, which means taking joy in other people's success. So as I saw you continue to crush things over the years and ultimately have an exit for your business, that gave me deep joy intrinsically to watch you and see your success. And I really, that filled me up. And so we said, what if we started a venture fund, also investing in tech entrepreneurs, but we did it with the notion of, instead of being cutthroat, what if we did it and we were supportive? And we prioritized generosity and kindness and compassion instead of like ripping people's throats out to make more money. And we're so outcome focused, like we're driving hard, but we're doing it in a kind way. And so, we raised a $40 million fund. We were oversubscribed. And today I'm still overseeing that fund. We invest in early stage tech companies that can not only make some money, but also can make an impact.
Yeah. So what does that look like? I mean, if there's a tech company that's interested in taking on capital from venture, like to have a guy like you in their corner is amazing. So what does that process look like? I mean, there's so many people out there with ideas. You look at, I mean, I think I met you in 2014. You actually probably introduced me to one thing that completely changed my life, which was EO. I think you and I were talking, and I think I was all over the place wanting to bang my head against the wall as an entrepreneur. Like, I think I need therapy. And you're like, go look at EO, go join EO. It's a bunch of other entrepreneurs. And that changed my life. I'm still involved with them after 10 years later. But, thinking about a tech startup in the world today with AI and all these different things, like AI, I don't remember that in our relationship even thinking about AI. But how does somebody now take on capital for an idea as an entrepreneur? Like, how do they come to Muditā and say, hey, I have something different that hasn't been done before. Invest in me.
Well, so our firm, double clicking on that, we invest in companies that are post-revenue, pre-growth spurt. So generally, the companies we invest in are companies that are doing $500,000 to $1 million a year in recurring revenue and they're scaling pretty quickly. So if someone's like just a blank idea on a piece of paper, we're always happy to talk and provide, feedback and coaching and stuff. We're probably not the right investor for that, but there are other firms that focus on seed stage that are, brand new, just an idea on the back of a napkin. But the answer to your question, what does someone do? If someone has an idea that, something on their heart they really want to build, I think you want to ask yourself, what's the problem that I'm solving here? More than falling in love with what's the idea, it's more like, what's the problem? And being fluid and flexible to just stay focused on how can I solve that problem in the best possible way? And then you say, can I solve the problem in a novel way? So just like I did back in ePrize you're asking about, instead of being like the 800th copycat company, I said, could I be, what's the only, quote unquote, the only? I was instead of the millionth internet advertising company, I was the only internet promotion company. So the other question I would ask an entrepreneur is, what are you the only? Where are you a category of one? What are you doing differently rather than what are you doing that blends in with everybody else? And so I think if you're really going after an important problem and you found a novel, innovative way to do it, that's half the battle there. And then luckily in Michigan and actually beyond, there's a lot of people that are willing to, write that first $50,000 check to help you build a prototype, or write that first $100,000 check to hire your first employee. And then, obviously every business is different, but it's more like, how do you navigate to get to enough progress and proof where then, a later stage investor would be interested.
So through EO, we just hosted a really large event last October where I think we had Magic Johnson come out, you spoke. And the one thing that I keep thinking about is I heard more individuals give feedback on your talk, and something you said right there, I think really stood out to me when you were speaking. You called it the judo flip. And to me, like, that stuck out so many times since I've run up, starting a new company, running up against all these different walls. Like, just think about it a little bit from a different perspective. Like, what's that judo flip? I mean, that's kind of exactly what you're talking about, right? With ePrizes, everybody's going this way, and you're like, judo flip it, I'm going to go that way.
Yeah, it's a fun, easy, memorable idea. But the notion is, if you're about to take on a challenge or an opportunity, you first kind of take a look. What's everybody else doing? What's the conventional approach? What would tradition suggest? And then before that diabolical temptation to follow everybody else, you say, all right, pause. What's a judo flip? What would it look like if I did the polar opposite? So if everybody's doing, going left, what would it look like if I went right? That kind of thing. And so I've always loved that idea. Like, okay, before you just blindly follow what's been done before, what if you did the complete opposite thing? And that's what I've tended to do throughout my career. And it's in my case, anyways, it's paid off.
So that leads into 4 times New York Times bestseller. So is your first book is Disciplined Dreaming?
Yes.
As many entrepreneurs, they all have stories. They all want to write books. You took action and wrote 4 of them, which I've read all 4 of them, and they're all phenomenal. Like, how did you start? How did you go down that path? I mean, did you just? Sounds like you have so much going on. You're such a wealth of knowledge. But how do you actually go about as an entrepreneur to sit down and write that first book and take action on that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. For me, it started with a message that was on my heart that I wanted to share. And it wasn't like, hey, let me tell you my war stories so I can, like, self-aggrandizement. It was more of like a gift. So I think to answer your question, someone thinking about that should say, what's the gift that I want to give to others? Not how can I tell everybody my story so they think I'm cool or something. And my was on my heart was that, being a musician and an entrepreneur, there are, I realized the importance of human creativity. And to this day, I realize there's 7 billion plus people on this planet, me and you included, that have varying levels of dormant creative capacity. In other words, we're hardwired to be creative. That's our natural state. We don't always use that. In fact, many of us have been told not to use it. Don't make mistakes. Don't try anything new. And I just felt that if I could help people unlock this incredible gift that we all have, the world would just be better. People's businesses would perform better. They could feed their families better. We could attack things like social injustice or climate change or whatever else. The world would just be better. And when you look back at the changes that made the world better in the past, from the printing press and penicillin, they were always from some creative idea. And so that was what was calling me. It was like, hey, the world's kind of goofy. And if I could help people be more creative, the world would be better. So that's what drove me to write the book. I felt like called to do it to a degree. And then, man, I just did a lot of research. I mean, you don't just sit down and, I suppose if it's a memoir, it's one thing. I didn't want it to be a memoir. So I must have read 100 books on creativity and innovation, even though I had a pretty good perspective myself. I must have read 500 academic reports and journals. I watched hours and hours of video. I not only did secondary research, but I did primary research. I interviewed over 200 people. in the writing of that book and asked them questions like, how do you come up with ideas? And how do you think about creativity? I did both quantitative and qualitative analysis. And so I wanted the book to have substance and depth and weight. I didn't want it to be like, hey, here's what I did. Look at me, And
Right.
and then you begin the writing process, which is hard. Writing is not an easy thing. I once met with a very famous author and I said, do you like writing? And he said, I like having written. I thought that was a very funny answer and I could relate to it. But is that essentially what drove me? And I know it sounds like a rehearsed answer, but it's not. Is like I just kept saying like, this is an important message. This is a message that people need to hear. It's going to help people's lives and families. And so that's what kind of just pushed me through the process. And then like anything, the first time you do something, it's always the hardest. Second time's a little easier. And I've written every week since. It was 15 years ago. And so you do something a lot, you get better at it. And I'm still not great, but you keep getting better.
So with the books, I assume there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that have that go down the path of how do you get your media and content out there. I mean, you quickly, I started seeing you everywhere in terms of keynote speaking. Was the book a really good gateway to just get that message out there and who Josh Linkner is? And was that the segue into your speaking?
Yeah, it was. I liked speaking always. I come from a jazz background, so I don't mind being on stage. And I've attended many speeches where you hear those one or two nuggets and it changes everything for you. I realized the impact of the spoken word. And by the way, you look back at famous speeches like MLK or John F. Kennedy or whatever. Like the spoken word has changed the world. It's the beginning of time. And so I was then, because I had this message and I wanted to make a difference. I was called to feel like I should speak. And, like anything else, your first speeches suck and you keep practicing. And I watched tape and, just studied the craft and tried to go from, I had amateur skills, but I was like, how do I go from a decent amateur to at least a bad professional? So I worked with a speaking coach for 8 months or so. I studied it. I watched other speakers and then kind of went after it. And, I'm very grateful. To this day, I've done 1,300 keynotes over the last 15 years. I have one tomorrow in Phoenix and the next day in Minneapolis. So I'm still very active in that. And it's great for me because I get to meet amazing people, CEOs of giant companies. I get to learn about other businesses. I get to contribute. I get to teach. I get to share. I get to create. So for me, it checks a lot of boxes, very fulfilling work. And not the way you think, man. Like it's one thing to get applause or you get a standing ovation. Look, that's awesome. Great. That actually is nice, but it doesn't. That's not what fuels me. What fuels me is knowing that you're really touching somebody. You're making a difference. And then what happens is like this feedback loop. So there's not a week that doesn't go by where I'm not getting a text or an email or a voicemail like, "Hey, Josh, I was in your speech 3 years ago, and we were just in a board meeting and we got stuck and we didn't know what to do. And someone said, well, try judo flipping it." And like that opened up the answer. And so just, this feedback loop of knowing that you're creating impact. I think, earlier in our careers, we're trying to create like proof, like, hey, look at me. You're trying to, show that you matter or you're significant. And then, and then later stage of your career, maybe you're driven more by impact. And so what drives me to do that work isn't like, oh, I got paid a bunch of money to go give a speech. It's more like, hey, I got to go sit in front of 1,500 people and help them rethink their approach to work and life. And hopefully, leave a couple positive nuggets behind.
At some point, I was going to ask you the question, like, why doesn't Josh Linkner ride off in the sunset on an island with a Mai Tai? But you just answered it. I mean, the passion of why you do what you do, truly inspiring. Like I mentioned, I've had the opportunity to see you speak a handful of times. The last event I was at, I mean, there was so many people around were like, oh my, like that was amazing. And I've seen, I hate to say thousands of speakers, but again, I've been part of EO now for 10 years. I've seen a lot of speakers, and most of the time, yeah, it's like the same old thing. I mean, you really do come, you're super motivational. There's a ton of nuggets. Your books have a ton of nuggets. But I want to pick on one thing about the award. I mean, you have won some pretty significant awards. So what is the recipient of the United States Presidential Champion of Change Award? Was that when Obama was president?
Yeah, I'll get back to just one last quick comment. You're the same way. You like building things. You like winning. You're competitive. The notion of sitting on a beach with a Mai Tai. A lot of times entrepreneurs dream about that, and then they have the resources to do it. They do it for like a month, and they want to pull their hair out. And so if you think about what really drives us as people, as humans, it's creating impact. It's solving tough problems. It's winning and being competitive. It's creating something. It's fulfilling your potential. And as fun as it is to go drink Mai Tais, I'll drink as many as anyone. Like, awesome. Like that, at some point, that is less enjoyable than it seems on the surface. And I think people who are truly entrepreneurial, you and I are kind of wired that way. I could give you $1 billion in cash, and you'd be like, yeah, I'm going to go drink Mai Tais. And then 2 weeks later, you'd be calling me up like, hey man, I got an idea for a new company. And to me, that's actually a really beautiful thing, not a negative thing, because I mean, we're kind of here for a reason. And I doubt it's to only sip my ties. It's to contribute. And so anyway, I didn't mean to get off on a tangent. But,
No, that's a great story. A little caveat to that. I mean, you've had very successful exit. I had an exit, and the partner I had at the time, we were just got done playing a round of golf. We had a really good relationship. We had like a 10-year plus run. And like when the thing was over, right, the closing of the deal, we literally looked at each other and we're like, huh, now what? Like, it was this very anticlimactic, like, this isn't over. Like, what's the next chapter? Like, you think it's like fireworks go off and this thing happens, but nothing changed. It was more like, okay, what now? Like, this was part of the plan. To me, I think it was a bigger divine intervention plan, but it's just really interesting that, you know, the illusion of riding off into the sunset, drinking Mai Tai sounds good for like a couple days. And then it's like, all right, back to the grind, right?
yeah, because it doesn't, you're still Wes, I'm still Josh. We're still the same people with the same desires to create things and challenge our minds and learn stuff. And so nothing against exits, by the way. This is awesome. Like, cause now you have more resources to do more things. All day long. But to me, people ask like, hey, when are you going to retire? I'm like, well, if I was like doing something I hated and I was trading my soul for money, I would have retired as quick as I could. But if you're doing something that you love and that you're passionate about and that fuels you, there's no such thing as like, I don't think I would quote unquote retire. That's just not who I am. But, and you too, I know. And back to it's actually a good segue to the award. Awards are nice. The things that have filled my soul more is like when someone you helped give a job and give a shot to, or maybe help them, learn something, and they just bought their first house. Like that's real rewarding. But I did win this. I was very lucky to win an award from President Obama called the Champion of Change Award for really for the work that we were doing in the city of Detroit, where we were, injecting entrepreneurship and backing sort of non-traditional entrepreneurs and giving a lot of support and love and helping to elevate our city. It's always cool, man. I got to go to the White House and I got to meet Obama. It was a cool photo op. So, to me, those markers are really nice. I'm not anti-awards. Like, awesome. That's pretty cool. But when I look back over my, career, that's actually, I'm proud of that. But like, there are things I'm more proud of that are probably less notable, but more intrinsically rewarding.
Yeah, for sure. I hear you on that. It's pretty amazing though to be recognized for that in like your career. I mean, reading your intro is just pretty amazing. But I want to pick on ImpactEleven. Can you talk a little bit about what ImpactEleven is and what purpose that company serves?
In 2016 or so I started speaking professionally, as mentioned, about 15 years ago. And I made every mistake you can make, most of them twice, by the way. But over time, kind of figured it out. I applied the same kind of rigor and discipline that I applied building a software business to the world of professional speaking. And in doing so, I got some real traction. My busiest year, I did 163 live events. And so, so anyway, people were kind of asking me, hey, can you help me launch my own speaking practice? Or can you help me be better on stage? Or could you help me, scale to the next level? And so it started as a passion project, which is essentially to help other keynote speakers launch and or scale their practice. And it's funny, as mentioned, sometimes what you start with and what you end with are very different. That has just evolved and morphed in a lot of interesting ways. Today, it's really a thriving community of several hundred thought leaders, all different sizes, shapes, ethnicities, topics, genders, etc. And we're doing this work together. So the notion is, it's called ImpactEleven, by the way, because like, how do we help create impact on a scale from 1 to 10 all the way up to 11? And so it started again as more of a training and development business. And now it's more of this thriving community where we're all kind of helping each other. We're walking this path together. We help each other with learning. We help each other with gigs. We help each other with stagecraft. And it is still training. And there's lots of, educational stuff. But basically, there's a community of people that are committing their lives to making the world a better place. And not only doing that, but to helping others rise to that challenge and thrive. And so it's pretty cool, man. Like, looking back, we've helped hundreds of speakers launch and scale. I get texts all the time. Josh, I just got my first standing ovation. Josh, I just booked my first gig in front of 2,000 people. Here's a picture. And so just knowing that I'm playing a small role in helping other thought leaders make their own mark in the universe has also been very rewarding.
Well, I love the trend with you. Again, people are coming to you with problem and you're like, I kind of see a solution here if I can create a company. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, you've had, going back through your journey, like how do you grow? It couldn't have been you alone, right? I mean, you're a visionary entrepreneur. Like, who did you keep around you? Like, how did you continuously bob and weave and make these moves? I mean, unless you're like this solo guy, but like, you talk about the cast and crew.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that. It absolutely was not just me. Like, no chance of that. along the way, we had some amazing people at ePrize. And by the way, one of the things I am most proud of, more so than the Obama Award, is what the alumni of ePrize have gone on to do. There's people that the chief mobility officer in the state of Michigan is ePrize, or people who have started businesses and sold them multiple times over since leading ePrize. I mean, like, it's pretty cool, actually. People at high levels in Google, and so I'm actually really proud of that. But yeah, all along I had this philosophy, like, be the dumbest guy in the room, not the smartest. Hire amazing people around you, and build a team that instead of makes you look like great all the time, that can offset your strengths and weaknesses. There are some things I'm pretty good at, and there's way more things that I suck at. And so, like, how do you bring people where their talents are going to be complementary? And so, yeah, all of the businesses I've been through the work and creativity and passion of others, not just me. But at ImpactEleven, we share a mutual friend, Jordan Brode. So I hired Jordan as an intern in 1995 for my business before ePrize. And, I sold that business. He then joined me at ePrize. And so he and I have been working together for now almost 30 years. And he's a really talented guy. He's the CEO of ImpactEleven. And he's actually graduated University of Michigan with an engineering degree. So he has the capacity to be an implementer. He can execute. But he actually is pretty visionary at the same time. He actually is one of those rare people that can span both. And Jordan, I would not be where I am without his support and incredible contribution, and many other people along the way. I tend to have these long-term relationships. There's another guy, Bob Marsh, who started working in my business, I think right around when Jordan did, 1995 or 96. And he's been with me through a number of different evolutions. He was a senior executive at ePrize. He left to start up his own company. I invested in his company. He had an exit. I got him a job at a different company that I was on the board of. He then came back, and I was the chief revenue officer at ImpactEleven. The consulting practice that I run called Platypus Labs, the CEO is a guy named Kaiser Yang, who started as a senior executive at ePrize in like 2002. And so I kind of like these, multi-decade relationships. And it's kind of neat when you can know how to rely on one another and, of course, provide support to help each other thrive and soar.
Well, it's really cool, too, because I think as an entrepreneur sometimes, people have an idea. When I first became an entrepreneur before, I'm like, I want to make as much money as possible. And like, that's what I want to do. And then I quickly realized that, yeah, I am, I need to find others that can lift me up, that share in the vision, because, man, it sucks being lonely as an entrepreneur, as a visionary. You need those right tactical people to help you execute on your vision. So it's really cool that you have these relationships along the way that have kind of, been behind the scenes. I think a lot of people just kind of see what's on the surface, but don't realize what's that picture. It's got like a big floating glacier, right? You see the beautiful glacier on the top, but underneath is like all the pits and all the different things, all the war stories. I had the opportunity. You were instrumental in helping HLM. I had a lot of individuals come from ePrize through HLM, and what was the cool thing was every so often they'd be like, they tell stories about ePrize, or like, back at ePrize this happened, and like all these cool stories. So like that legacy lives on. That's really cool. So and also at ImpactEleven, I've heard a lot of feedback, and people are like, they want to get into the speaker circuit, and they're like, yeah, I'm doing this thing, and Josh Linkner's a part of it. I'm like, that's so cool, because I've seen you on stage firsthand, knowing how great you are, but then now it's impacting others to say, hey, like, I'm now taking what I've learned and all my mistakes and giving it to you. Like, that's such a cool thing to see, and then hear the feedback from people. Like, that's a pretty awesome thing. So with Platypus Labs, what does that company focus on? So you have the speaking right now, Muditā Venture Partners. What's Platypus?
Yeah, and by the way, that notion you're talking, obviously, a lot of entrepreneurs are listening to this program, and the notion of not only achieving something for yourself, but then bringing someone along for the ride with you. Helping the person who's a step behind you, cross over the treacherous rivers, like that. That's a really intrinsically rewarding feeling, And so to be a part of it, like helping others launch their speaking practice, has been great. Helping other entrepreneurs thrive through investment and support. There's nothing better. Platypus Labs, to answer your question, I was often speaking at big companies, and I'd get off the stage, and the CEO would be like, "Man, that was awesome! Thank you." But like, can you help us drive these ideas deeper? Like, you can only do you know the best keynote in the world. It's only 60 minutes. Like, how much can you really do? But I kept getting asked, like, can you account my whole company? Can we embed these ideas, change our culture? We have 150,000 employees. And for many years, I said, no. I was like, yeah, go read my book. I didn't know what to do. But a lot of fellow speakers, I realized, had a consulting practice that was based off of their original body of work and the research, and they would supplement. So when someone asked that same question, they'd say, well, actually, yeah, we have training programs, we have consulting practice. And so I'd call up Kaiser, who was, again, a longtime friend and colleague, who was the CEO of Platypus Labs. And we built a practice where when a company like Cardinal Health, who's been a many-year client of ours, and I give a speech and the CEO says, hey, that was pretty cool. Then we say, well, we can follow through. and provide training and development programs and consulting and research that will help all 100,000 people at Cardinal Health become everyday innovators. And so that's also been rewarding. Again, it gives the opportunity to leave a bigger impact than anyone could possibly make in a 60-minute keynote to drive long-lasting and substantive change over time. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I would think about how many times you go on stage and make such an impact. And so many people are reaching out like, help me, or, can you look in this? And you're like, I mean, at some point you have to say no because you only have so much time in a day. And you said you had about 160 at your peak. Like, that's a lot of planes. That's a lot of timing trains, getting to where you need to go. I want to add something to the last point you made. It made me think of it, which I think is valuable for me anyway. When the individuals you work with along the way, I think a lot of people have this notion like all days are great. Like, there's some bad days where I'm off. Like, I think I'm coming off COVID right now. My whole family's sick. And then you have partners or people in your corner that like pick up your slack. I think to be on point every day as an entrepreneur is so hard where, some days you're just, hey, I got to do this, but it kind of makes that whole ecosystem go because you're not going to be on every single day.
100% right. And, we used to think of these entrepreneurs as somebody who was bulletproof and infallible and had no weaknesses. And that's not only not true, but I think we put that pressure on ourselves. It's impossible you're never going to live up to that standard. And now more than ever, I guess in my, a little bit older age, it's like, I think it's more about bringing your humanity to the surface and admitting when you're having a lousy day, and that's okay, and showing some vulnerability. No, we're not bulletproof. We're people. And sometimes we do really good work and we should own that and be proud of it. Sometimes we do stupid things and that's okay. Like, well, let's figure it out, navigate that. And I actually think that people around you respond better if you give them a chance to shine. Like, I think in my younger years, I was like, I tried to be everything for everybody and I was like muscling it out and gripping so tightly. Yeah. And now it's like, I'm going to try to relax a little bit and give other people a chance to shine and create a little bit of room for others. And I actually think it's a more effective approach to leadership and entrepreneurship. When instead of being just like charge and take the hill every minute, you're willing to give some grace to others and to yourself.
No, that's great, Josh. I could talk to you forever. I know I got to let you go though. You're a very busy guy, but we have the Speaker Bureau, we have the Platypus Labs, we have the tech venture stuff. If there's anybody out there that wants to get in contact with you, what is the best way for them to contact Josh Linkner?
Yeah, thanks, man. It's really been a pleasure hanging out with you. I've always enjoyed our conversations and so grateful to have you as a friend. The easiest thing is just my website, which is just joshlinkner.com. There's links to the other stuff from there, our venture fund and everything else. But just my name, joshlinkner.com. And I'm also on social channels. And if anyone wants to ping me, I'm happy to chat.
Which your website, by the way, I did go on there the other day, is pretty amazing. It's very, very nice.
Thank you.
Josh, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
All the best to you. Congrats on this great podcast.
Thank you. If you learned something today, please tell somebody about the podcast. Thanks again, Josh Linkner. Appreciate it. We'll see you soon. Thank you. This has been another episode of Entrepreneur Intel. Thank you for joining us. For show notes or other episodes, please visit us at entrepreneurintel.com. Until next time.